My husband left me bleeding on the nursery floor to celebrate his birthday. 3 days later, he came home to an empty bassinet and a house that knew everything. The last thing I remember clearly is the carpet. Cream-colored, soft. The kind of carpet you choose for a nursery because you imagine sitting on it, reading board books, building block towers, watching someone small learn to crawl. I had chosen it myself, 8 months pregnant, on a Saturday afternoon when everything about the future still felt like something I was building on purpose. I was lying on it now, on my side, cheek pressed against the fibers, 10 days after giving birth, and I could not get up. Ethan was crying from the bassinet 3 feet away. 3 feet. I could see him, could see the edge of the white muslin blanket shifting with his movement, could hear the escalating quality of his cry, the specific register of a newborn escalating from discomfort to genuine distress. 3 feet. I put my hand flat on the carpet and tried to push myself up, and my arm buckled, and I went back down, and the ceiling tilted above me, and I thought, this is not normal. This is not the ordinary terrible of 10 days postpartum. Something is wrong with me in a way that has a name. I had told Ryan this. I had told him twice. The first time was the previous morning when I'd noticed that the bleeding, which my OB had told me would taper significantly by day 8, had not tapered, had worsened. I told Ryan at breakfast and he said, "Bodies are weird after pregnancy. Your mom had you without any drama." My mother had, in fact, had significant complications with my birth that had required a 3-day hospital stay, but Ryan had not been present for that information, and I did not have the energy to correct him. The second time was that morning, an hour before he left. I was on the bathroom floor, not dramatically, not in the way of someone performing distress, but in the way of someone whose legs have decided they are no longer fully operational, and I told him I thought something was seriously wrong, and I might need to go to the hospital. Ryan was checking his hair in the mirror. He had a weekend bag packed. He had reservations at a resort in Aspen, a solo birthday trip, which I had agreed to 6 months ago when we were pregnant and optimistic, and I had not yet understood what 10 days postpartum would feel like. He had a flight at noon. He looked at me in the mirror, not with fear, not with love, with irritation. "Every woman feels awful after having a baby," he said. "Take an aspirin." Ryan, my voice was doing something I didn't want it to do. A thinning, a weakening, not from emotion, but from something physical, some resource running low that I couldn't name. "I think I need a hospital." He turned from the mirror, looked at me on the bathroom floor. "It's my birthday weekend, Emma." He picked up his bag. "Don't call me unless the house is actually on fire." The front door closed. His car, the black Audi, the one he'd bought himself for his last birthday, a pattern I was only now fully understanding, disappeared down the driveway. I lay on the bathroom floor for a while. Then I heard Ethan. I got to the nursery. I don't know how, exactly. I have a fragmented memory of the hallway, of my hand on the wall, of the specific determination that is not bravery, but simply the mammalian drive toward your child. I got to the nursery and I sat on the floor next to the bassinet and I reached up and touched Ethan's face and he stopped crying for a moment, and then I couldn't hold my arm up anymore and I went sideways onto the carpet, cream-colored, soft. The carpet I had chosen because I imagined sitting on it with my son. My phone was on the floor 2 feet away. I could see the screen. I tried to reach it. My arm moved 4 inches and stopped. The screen lit up. Ryan's Instagram, posted 3 minutes ago. A balcony, snow-covered mountains behind him, a whiskey glass catching the resort light. He was laughing at the camera, the specific performative laugh of a man who needs an audience even when he's alone. The caption, "Here's to surviving high-maintenance wives. Sometimes you've got to choose yourself. Happy birthday to me." His friends were already commenting. Fire emojis, king behavior. "You deserve it, bro." The phone screen went dark. Ethan started crying again. I could not reach him. I lay on the cream carpet in the nursery of the house I had thought was a life I was building, and I listened to my 10-day-old son cry, and the darkness came for me the way darkness comes when a body has been running on fumes and has finally run out. Gone. Just like that. I need to go back further, because you cannot understand what happened in that nursery without understanding the 18 months that preceded it. My name is Emma Calloway Parker. Calloway is the name I am returning to. I am 31 years old, a former project manager at a healthcare consulting firm, and I am, according to my therapist, Dr. Patricia Voss, who I will tell you more about shortly, a person who is very good at adapting to environments and very slow to recognize when an environment has become dangerous. I met Ryan Parker 3 years ago at a work function. He was in commercial lending, which meant he spent his days in a version of my professional world, but with different vocabulary, and he had a quality of easy authority that I found compelling before I understood what it was made of. He was funny. He was charming. He had strong opinions about wine and restaurants and travel, and he directed those opinions toward me with an attention that felt, at the beginning, like being chosen. The first red flag was so ordinary, I walked past it 17 times before I started counting. Ryan did not like to be inconvenienced. Not in the dramatic way, not tantrums, not obvious cruelty. In the specific, accumulating way of a man who has arranged his life so that his discomfort is always someone else's problem to solve. He left dishes adjacent to the dishwasher rather than in it, which is a thing I am listing, not because it matters, but because it is the smallest item in a taxonomy of entitlement that extended all the way to leaving his postpartum wife on a bathroom floor. The second red flag came 8 months into the relationship, when I had a minor surgical procedure. Nothing serious, outpatient, but I was told to have someone with me for the afternoon. Ryan dropped me off at the surgery center, said he had a work thing, and sent his assistant a Grubhub gift card for my lunch. The surgery center called him twice when I was in recovery. He let it go to voicemail. I told myself he was under pressure, that he wasn't built for medical situations, that the love languages are different and this was just his. I have a graduate degree. I am not an unintelligent person. I tell you this not to excuse myself, but because I think it is important to be honest about how thoroughly a particular kind of man can obscure himself within the ordinary architecture of a relationship, especially when you are someone who has learned to adapt. We married 18 months after we met. I was pregnant 7 months later, which was planned. I want to be clear about that. It was planned. It was wanted. Ethan was the most wanted thing in my life before he existed. What was not planned was the version of Ryan that pregnancy revealed. He found pregnancy inconvenient, not the concept. The concept of fatherhood he embraced entirely. In social settings, in the way he talked about it to friends. In the nursery, he helped paint on a Saturday and photographed for Instagram with a caption about building our family. But the reality of a pregnant woman in his house, with her changing body and her exhaustion and her specific needs, those were an imposition on a man whose comfort was the organizing principle of his life. I told myself it would change when the baby came. It did not change when the baby came. The labor was 31 hours, which is on the longer end, and Ryan spent significant portions of it on his phone or in the hallway on calls, and came back twice smelling like the hospital cafeteria. When Ethan was born, at 4:47 a.m. on a Thursday, purple and screaming and immediately devastatingly real, Ryan held him for 7 minutes, handed him back, said, "He looks like a Parker," and fell asleep in the recliner. I held my son all night. I watched his face. I thought about what I had just done and who I had done it with, and I felt, for the first time with any real clarity, afraid. The first week home was the kind of hard that people mention but you cannot prepare for. Ethan nursed every 90 minutes. I hadn't slept more than 2 consecutive hours since before the birth. My body was doing things I will not describe in detail except to say difficult. The kind of difficult that requires a partner. The kind of difficult that reveals very quickly whether the person next to you is capable of showing up for something that asks more than they're comfortable giving. Ryan slept through Ethan's night wakings. Not once, not occasionally, every time. He had bought earplugs before the birth. I functioned badly on interrupted sleep, you know how I get. And he wore them, and he slept. And I nursed a newborn in the dark and told myself this was temporary, and that he was adjusting, and that I was probably not being fair. By day 5, I noticed the bleeding was not improving the way my discharge paperwork had said it would. By day 7, I mentioned this to Ryan, and he said, "Bodies are weird." By day 8, I called my OB's after-hours line, and the nurse told me to monitor it and come in if it got worse. By day 9, it was worse. By day 10, I was on the nursery floor. What happened after I lost consciousness? My brother Nathan, who lives in Seattle and who calls me every Sunday and had not reached me for 6 hours, called his college friend Daniel Reeves, who lives 12 minutes from my house. Nathan has a specific protocol he has mentioned only once, in passing, 2 years ago. If I can't reach you and something feels wrong, I'm calling Daniel. I had not thought about this in 2 years. Daniel had not been to my house in 18 months. He came anyway. He found the front door unlocked. Ryan had not locked it when he left. I would learn later, which is a detail I have tried not to think about too carefully. He heard Ethan from the entryway. He followed the sound to the nursery. He found me on the floor. He called 911. He picked up my son. He stayed on the floor next to me, holding Ethan against his chest, until the paramedics arrived at 2:23 p.m. I know the time because it is on the incident report, which I have read 11 times and which I keep in a folder I look at when I need to remember that what happened to me was real and documented and witnessed. I woke up in a hospital bed at St. Michael's Medical Center at approximately 6:00 p.m., the ICU. Fluorescent light. The specific sounds of machines that are performing functions your body has temporarily stopped performing on its own. A nurse whose name I later learned was Patricia, not my therapist, a different Patricia. The universe, apparently having a limited supply of names, was adjusting something near my arm when I became aware enough to register her. "You're at St. Michael's," she said, immediately and calmly, the way ICU nurses say things. The measured delivery of people who have learned that the first moments of waking are the most important for establishing orientation. "You've been in surgery. You have a postpartum hemorrhage. You're stable now." "My son," I said. My voice was barely functional. "He's here. He's safe. A man named Daniel Reeves brought him in. He's with nursing staff on the maternity floor. He's fine." I closed my eyes, opened them. "My husband," I said. Something passed across Patricia's face, a professional neutrality that told me before she said a word that this was a subject that had already been discussed. "Detective Bennett is here to speak with you," she said, "when you feel ready." I was not ready. I was ready. "Send her in," I said. Detective Carla Bennett has been with the city's major crimes division for 19 years. She is 52, compact, with close-cropped gray hair, and the specific quality of someone who has spent 2 decades listening to people describe terrible things and has developed a stillness that is not indifference, but its opposite. The full, alert presence of someone who understands that accurate listening is the most important thing she can offer. She sat in the chair beside my hospital bed with a folder on her lap, and she looked at me for a moment before she opened it. "How are you feeling?" she said. "Like someone who nearly bled to death," I said. "What happened?" She walked me through it in the efficient, specific way of someone who respects the intelligence of the person she's talking to. Postpartum hemorrhage, retained placental tissue. My OB, Dr. Sandra Marsh, would confirm later, something that could have been identified and treated at any point in the preceding 3 days if I had been able to get to a hospital. The surgery had been 2 hours. I had received 2 units of blood. The responding paramedics noted significant blood loss at the scene, Bennett said. The nursery carpet. I nodded. They also noted something else. She paused. Not for drama. Bennett is not a dramatic person. For accuracy, making sure the next sentence was exactly right. There was a puncture mark on the inside of your left arm, under the bruising from the delivery IV sites, which is why it wasn't immediately apparent. She opened the folder. Our forensic team found a vial in your husband's car, in the center console. A sedative compound, midazolam. It's used medically for procedural sedation, but it has a street presence as well. She looked at me steadily. The toxicology panel we ran when you were admitted shows midazolam in your system, in concentrations consistent with that vial. The room was very quiet. I looked at the IV line in my arm, at the bruising above my elbow, at the specific location of the puncture mark that Bennett was indicating in the photograph. He drugged me, I said. The words came out at a volume that surprised me. Very quiet. The quiet of someone who has said something so enormous that any volume other than nearly silent seems inadequate. That is what the evidence indicates, Bennett said. We believe the injection was administered before he left, which would explain the rapid deterioration. Midazolam combined with an existing hemorrhage would have... She stopped. It would have accelerated everything. I looked at my hands. At the hands that had tried to push myself up off the carpet and couldn't. At the arm that had reached for my phone 2 feet away and fallen short. He had not simply left me. He had made sure I couldn't stop him. He had packed his bag and kissed my forehead. He had kissed my forehead. I remembered that. I had thought it meant something. And he had driven to the airport. And he had posted a video on Instagram about surviving high-maintenance wives. And somewhere in the timeline of that morning, he had given me a drug that made certain I would not be able to call for help. And Ethan, 10 days old, in the bassinet, 3 feet away from his unconscious mother with no one coming. For the first time since I had woken up in this bed, my composure cracked. Not loudly. I am not a loud crier. I have never been a loud crier, but completely. A silent, total dissolution, the kind that happens when the thing you've been holding becomes too heavy all at once. Patricia the nurse appeared from somewhere and put her hand on my arm and said nothing, which was exactly right. Bennett waited. She gave me 4 minutes, exactly, which I know because there is a clock above the door in that room and I watched it while I reassembled myself. Then I said, "What else do you have?" My attorney, Lena Griffith, arrived at St. Michael's at 8:17 p.m. that evening. Lena Griffith has 24 years of family and criminal law practice, with a subspecialty in domestic cases that have intersecting criminal elements. She is 49, originally from Atlanta, and carries herself with the specific authority of a woman who has spent a career being underestimated by opposing counsel and has found it professionally advantageous. My brother Nathan had called her from Seattle the moment Daniel called him from the ambulance. Nathan had researched her on his phone on the way to the airport. Nathan had done, in approximately 40 minutes, what I should have done months ago, found the right person. Lena sat next to Bennett and they introduced themselves to each other with the brief, mutual assessment efficiency of two professionals who have worked parallel cases before and know how to share a room. Ryan Parker was located at the resort in Aspen at approximately 5 p.m. today, Bennett said, briefing us both. He's been contacted by local law enforcement and is en route back to the city. He's been told there's been a medical emergency. He doesn't know I'm alive, I said. He knows there's been an emergency. He doesn't know the specifics. She paused. He also doesn't know about the vial or the tox screen. He'll lawyer up the moment he lands, Lena said. He will, Bennett agreed. So we need to be precise about what we do in the next 12 hours, Lena said. She looked at me. Can you read some documents? I told her I could. She placed a folder on my hospital blanket. Ryan's phone records. 6 months of text messages obtained on an emergency warrant based on the evidence from the car. Lena had worked quickly, and the warrant had been granted by a judge who, Bennett told me, had taken approximately 4 minutes to review the request before signing. I read through them slowly. Ryan to a contact saved as Vanessa K., whose full name I would learn was Vanessa Kell, 34, a marketing consultant he had apparently met at a conference 8 months ago, 3 months before Ethan was born. She's losing it again. Says she's bleeding. I swear she'll do anything to keep me trapped at home. Vanessa. Then don't let her. You deserve 1 weekend. Ryan. Nanny starts Monday. After that, I'm talking to a lawyer. I'm not spending my 30s chained to a crying baby and a wife who looks like death. I turned the page. My hands were not shaking. I want to be precise about this. I was very still, reading, the way I get when I am processing information that requires accuracy rather than reaction. Ryan. Aspen first. Divorce later. Just need to make sure she doesn't get half. Vanessa. Make her look unstable if you can. Ryan. Trust me. She's doing the work for me. The final message in the exchange. Timestamped 10:47 a.m. 11 minutes after he walked out the front door. If she calls, ignore it. She's fine. Let her learn what it's like when I'm not her servant. I set the pages down on my blanket. I looked at Bennett. How solid is the toxicology? I said. The midazolam concentration in your system is consistent with an injection administered approximately 2 to 3 hours before you lost consciousness, she said, which aligns with the morning timeline. The compound in the vial from his car is an exact match. The vial has his fingerprints. I thought about my OB appointments. About the way Ryan had occasionally accompanied me to them and then waited in the car. About the medical supply catalogs I had once found on his browser history and dismissed as irrelevant. About the morning he had brought me a cup of tea. He almost never made me tea and sat with me while I I drank it, and I had thought, he's trying, and I had drunk it. The tea, I said. Bennett looked at me. The morning he left, he brought me tea. He sat with me while I drank it. I looked at my left arm. That's when he did it. Bennett wrote something in her notebook. That's very helpful, she said, quietly. That's very helpful, Emma. Ryan's flight landed at 11:40 p.m. He was met at the gate by two detectives, not Bennett, who was with me, but her partner, Detective Marcus Cole, 16 years on the force, and a colleague from the Family Crimes Unit. Ryan was escorted to a vehicle and taken to the precinct for questioning. Lena was there by the time I was updated, not physically, but by phone, relaying information to me in the hospital room where I was nursing Ethan, who had been brought to me at 9:00 p.m., a nurse settling him in my arms and stepping back, and the specific weight and warmth of him against my chest was the thing that finally made me understand, fully and physically, how close it had been. How close. I held him for a long time without talking to anyone. Then I called Nathan, who was on a flight and landed at midnight, and came directly to the hospital and sat in the chair beside my bed and held my hand without saying much, which is exactly what a sibling who has known you your entire life knows how to do. Ryan's questioning ran 4 hours. I know the shape of it from the incident report, from Bennett's briefing the following morning, and from what Lena later described as a man whose story had been designed for a different situation entirely. He had prepared for grief, for shock, for a husband who had not known the severity and felt terrible, and was cooperating fully with whatever investigation was needed to understand what had happened to his beloved wife. He had the notes of it. He had apparently spent the flight constructing the performance, which is a detail I have sat with many times. He had not prepared for a detective who put a photograph of a midazolam vial on the table in front of him. He had not prepared for a toxicology report. He had not prepared for his own text messages, printed and organized by date, laid across a conference table in a police precinct at 2 in the morning. He had not prepared, most significantly, for me to be alive. I know this because Bennett told me what he said when they confirmed it. She told me with the specific precision of someone who understands that exact words matter. Ryan said, "She's alive," not "thank God," not "can I see her?" She's alive. In the specific register of a statement that contains a question, the question being, how is that possible? Bennett nodded once when she told me this. A small, contained acknowledgement. Yes, she said. We noticed the phrasing. Ryan Parker was charged with attempted murder in the first degree. The specific charge, the legal mechanism under which the sedation, the deliberate abandonment, and the documented intent constituted an attempt on my life rather than criminal negligence, was something Lena and the district attorney's office worked out in the week following his arrest. I will not pretend I understand every element of the legal architecture. What I understand is the outcome. He was also charged with child endangerment. Ethan was 10 days old and left in a house with an incapacitated primary caregiver who had been deliberately rendered incapacitated. That charge was, in some ways, the one that meant the most to me, because it was the one that named what had been done to my son specifically. Vanessa Kell was interviewed and cooperated with the investigation. She provided additional text and email records, including a deleted conversation that her phone's forensic extraction recovered, in which Ryan had discussed the midazolam, where he had obtained it, how it worked, the timeline. She had not known about the drug. She had known about the abandonment. She had encouraged the abandonment. The distinction between those two things determined her legal exposure, which was ultimately limited to a civil matter rather than a criminal one. She also provided something that I had not expected and that Bennett delivered to me with careful neutrality: photographs. Ryan and Vanessa, dating back 6 months, in locations that documented the relationship with the thoroughness that people who believe they are invulnerable are sometimes careless enough to create. A restaurant I recognized as the one he had told me was a client dinner, a hotel I had not known about, a weekend I had believed was a work conference. I looked at the photographs once, filed them with the divorce documentation, did not look at them again. My OB doctor, Sandra Marsh, 18 years in obstetrics and gynecology, a woman who had delivered Ethan and who came to visit me in the hospital on day 2, with an expression I can only describe as the face of someone trying very hard to remain professional in the presence of something that is making professionalism difficult, confirmed that the retained placental tissue causing my hemorrhage would have been detectable on a standard postpartum exam. If you had come in at day 7, she said carefully, or day 8 or day 9, this would have been a same-day outpatient procedure. A scan, an evacuation, you'd have been home that evening. She looked at my hands. The sedation accelerated the blood loss, she said. The compound interacts with clotting factors. She stopped, restarted. It made it worse. He knew that, I said. She looked at me. I don't know what he knew, she said. But I know that midazolam and a postpartum hemorrhage are a very dangerous combination, and that anyone who administered one while knowing about the other. She stopped again. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The morning I was discharged from St. Michael's, Lena met me at the hospital with a folder that contained the emergency protective order, a standard procedure in the circumstances, she said, filed as a matter of course, and the initial divorce filing. I signed both at the nursing station with a pen the ward clerk lent me, Ethan in a carrier against my chest, Nathan beside me. The ward clerk, who had been watching the situation with the specific compassion of someone who sees a great deal of human difficulty in her work and has never become indifferent to it, handed me back my pen and said, "Good luck." I said, "Thank you." I meant it entirely. I want to tell you about the moment Bennett described to me, the moment Ryan came home. I was not there. I was in the hospital. Ethan was with me. But Bennett told me, and I have played it back many times in the way that you play back things things you needed to witness and didn't, filling in what you can. He came home on a Tuesday, 3 days after he left, humming. A new watch on his wrist, something he'd bought himself in Aspen, a purchase he'd posted about on Instagram with the caption birthday treat. He parked the Audi in the driveway with the ease of a man returning to normalcy. He would have been planning on the drive home the construction of the next several days, the grief, the horror, the husband who had not known, who was devastated, who was going to need a great deal of understanding and support from everyone around him. He opened the front door. Silence. Not the silence of a sleeping baby, the silence of an empty house. He stepped inside, called my name. Nothing. He walked to the nursery, and here I have to rely on Bennett's account, which comes from his own statement, and which I find in its detail more revealing than he intended. He walked to the nursery, and the bassinet was empty, and the cream-colored carpet had a stain on it that was not ambiguous about what it was. He stood in the doorway of the room I had chosen the carpet for, and he looked at the stain, and he called my name again, and got no answer. For the first time, according to Bennett's read of his statement, Ryan Parker looked genuinely afraid. He called 911. He told the operator his wife was missing, and there was blood on the floor. While he was on the call, his phone rang. Bennett's partner, Detective Cole. Ryan answered. "Mr. Parker," Cole said. "This is Detective Cole from the Major Crimes Division. We need you to come to the precinct." "What's happened? Where is my wife?" "Your wife is at St. Michael's Medical Center." A pause. "She's alive?" That pause. That question. Bennett told me about it twice. The second time I asked her to tell me specifically, what did his voice sound like when he said it? She looked at me carefully, the way she does. "Like a man recalculating," she said. "I am going to tell you where things stand now, because stories like this one have aftermaths that take longer than the crisis, and matter more than the confrontation. Ryan has entered a not guilty plea. His attorney, Marcus Hale, 29 years of criminal defense, a formidable reputation I am trying not to think about too carefully, is constructing an argument around the compound's presence in the car, predating the marriage, around the injection timeline, around a series of alternative explanations for the toxicology results that my legal team has characterized as creative, and that Dr. David Park, a forensic toxicologist with 22 years of expert witness experience who Lena retained in the second week, has characterized more specifically. We are preparing for trial. I say we and I mean Lena and Bennett and Dr. Marsh and Dr. Park and Nathan, who has relocated to my city for the duration, sleeping on my couch and bringing me coffee at 6 a.m. when Ethan wakes up, which is the specific form of love that I think about when I think about what love actually is. I see Dr. Patricia Voss twice a week. She has been a trauma therapist for 27 years, and she is helping me build a vocabulary for what happened to me that is larger than the legal terminology and more accurate than the narrative Ryan spent our marriage constructing. She told me something in our third session that I have written on an index card on my kitchen windowsill. Recognizing what something was is not the same as having chosen it. You didn't choose this. Seeing it clearly now doesn't mean you should have seen it then. Ethan is 4 months old. He is healthy. He is enormous. He has tripled his birth weight, which Dr. Marsh says is ahead of the typical curve, and which I take as a personal affirmation that we are both, against the available evidence, going to be fine. He smiles now. Not the reflexive newborn almost smiles. Real ones. Responsive ones. The specific smile he gives me when I come into his line of vision, which is the thing that has reorganized my entire understanding of what matters. He does not know what happened in the nursery. He will not know for a long time. When he is old enough to understand it, I will tell him the true version, not the version that protects anyone's reputation. The true one. I owe him that, and I owe it to myself. And I owe it to the version of me on that cream carpet who spent the last of her consciousness trying to reach a phone 2 feet away because her child needed her. She made it. We made it. Barely. But barely counts. On a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after I came home from the hospital, I was sitting on the kitchen floor with Ethan on a blanket between my legs, watching him discover his hands, which is the most remarkable thing I have ever witnessed. A small person encountering the fact of their own fingers, when my phone buzzed. Bennett. Forensics came back on the Aspen hotel room. Found a burner phone. Messages go back 9 months. There's more. Can we talk this afternoon? I looked at my son. At his fist. At the face that was going to grow up knowing that his mother fought for him in every way she knew how. I typed back, "Yes, come at 2. Then I put my phone face down on the blanket, and I stayed on the kitchen floor with my son until he fell asleep, watching his chest rise and fall with the specific animal gratitude of a person who knows exactly how close the alternative came. That was enough for Tuesday morning. The rest could wait until 2 o'clock. Ryan Parker thought he had left me somewhere I couldn't get back from. He was wrong about that. He was wrong about a great many things, but that one most of all.